Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about targeting, or at least one of the tools in your arsenal when you are deciding how you're going to put together and how you're going to formulate your ad sets. And that is interest targeting. So in today's module, I'm going to give you a very thorough explanation of how we view interest targeting, as well as how to use it most effectively in your ad campaigns. So let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, interests, sizes, and how to find the best ones for your case. And in today's teaching, we are going to go over what is an interest and where do they come from, questions to ask yourself to find good interests, examples on how we find interest for clients, as well as how to run an interest-based ad. So, what is an interest and where do they actually come from? Now, an interest we bundle together with sort of all the standard ways of targeting, and they can be found in the detailed targeting section of each ad set. Now, you can think about interests as sort of buckets of people that Facebook has classified based on either demographics, interests, and behaviors. So as I said, what is an interest and where do they actually come from? Well, any person can be on any amount of buckets at the same time, which means there is overlap between these buckets. Now, you often hear when people teach the art of media buying that you should be worried about not competing with yourself. But honestly, this is the thing you actually have to worry about the least. Because ladies and gentlemen, you know how many advertisers on Facebook want to reach any single person at any given time? The number must be in the tens and hundreds of thousands of advertisers. Okay, so are you really worried every time Coca-Cola runs ads because they're also technically competing with you? Same thing with McDonald's. Well, in fact, I don't actually know if either of those actually advertise on Facebook, but you get the point. They're all still targeting these same buckets, the same as us internet marketer, because I said each of these sort of buckets or each of these interests, they can kind of fill multiple buckets at the same time. So if you're doing broad targeting, you could still technically be advertising to someone who also falls under these interests. So there's a lot of overlap is kind of what I'm trying to say. Plus, according to our Facebook rep, you don't actually compete yourself if you're on the same ad account. Okay, so just bear that in mind. If you're in the same ad account, and this isn't written officially anywhere, but from what we understand and what we've been told by as high up people as we can kind of get our hands on after being in this business for 5 years, you don't actually compete with yourself if you're in the same ad account. Now, I also invite you to go ahead and test it. Launch ad sets with the same audience. Launch one and days after, another one, and you will never get the same result nor the same subset of the people. Now, if you want to understand why this happens, refer to the module How Facebook Works on the Inside. Now, with that out of the way, let's do a quick tour of the detailed targeting available. Now, it's important that you know of at least all of these in the back of your mind. That way you will have an idea of what Facebook is capable of. Now, as I said, ladies and gentlemen, you don't need to know every single one of these off by heart, but it is very important to at least just understand some of these categories. And you can see right here, we're looking at education level. All right, so that's something that you can actually target. Next thing is financial. All right, so this is income. Now, a lot of this stuff isn't as reliable as it was years ago, because obviously then you could technically target someone who just makes a certain amount of money, and if it was right on the money, then Facebook would be a pretty easy game to play. But another very interesting one is friends of engagers, right? So people or friends of even customers. All right, here you can see right here we've got parents. Whether they're parents, whether they're not parents. Obviously, if you're working with baby brands or whatever infant related products, then obviously that's gonna be very useful for you. You can see right here a lot of people on Facebook, and I'm sure you remember if you were in school, it's a big deal if you put in a relationship with someone. Well, obviously Facebook uses that data and it sees, okay, who's married, who's in a relationship, etc., etc. So that is another area that you can target. Let's say, for example, you're doing a Valentine's Day ad for one of your clients, and you only want to target people who are in relationships or potentially people who aren't even in relationships. And here you can see that we have interests as well. And this really is a long list. And I'm going to go in detail about interests and sort of more specific stuff. I'm actually going to show you how we use specific interests, or how we take an angle and then from that angle we sort of populate interests that would best serve that angle as well as that product. And you can see right here, I'm scrolling through a little bit more, and obviously not all of these are interest targeting. but in some of these do fall into demographics. But as I said, this is really just to show you, what you're going to find when you actually go inside of Facebook and when you actually decide, who to actually target. Now, what is an interest and where do they come from? Well, let's review some of the attributes of each interest. Now, we saw that it can belong to one of three categories: demographics, interests, and behaviors. Now, this category will appear on the left in gray, and as a rule of thumb, just know that 90% of the time you want to be targeting interests rather than anything else. Now, this is mainly because interests are the only audiences with enough size for targeting to make sense. And as I said, this is a pattern that we found, all right? There are exceptions to this rule. Now, when you hover over one of the options, it will actually show you the size of the interest and also the category as well as subcategories it belongs to. Now, the size refers to its global size, meaning all Facebook users. Now, if you're targeting a specific country or countries, which by the way you should, even if your client can ship worldwide, this audience will narrow down. Now, once you've chosen an interest, for example, we've got digital marketing here, which shows a size of 175 million on the top right corner. It'll actually show you the size of the audience that meets all the conditions you've actually put. So in this case, we're targeting 4 countries, and the audience goes from 175 million to 12 million. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, there is no magic or minimum size of your interest. We usually go for ones that have potential reach of over 200,000 after everything is said and done, but we've also made audiences of 50,000 work and so on. Now, if you have local business clients, you have to worry even less about the size of the audience. Okay, so I actually want you to refer to the module Facebook Native versus Facebook Lead Gen and actually setting it up for more information on what kind of targeting to do for local business. Because, local business, you are constrained by just the range, right? So with that, with local business, we do far less targeting stuff than we do with e-commerce, info products, SaaS businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So it's actually, even more simple. Now, I have actually, apologies, gone ahead and repeated this slide, but as you can see right here, it's gone down from 175 to 12 million. Now, another thing to mention is when we have clients that ship worldwide or do info products, we usually go with these countries on the screen. And sometimes we also add Australia, although it's not always a great performer. But if you have a summer product, you can actually advertise to Australia when it is winter in the Northern Hemisphere. Now, the interests that we surfed in the video are not all the interests available, and your best bet is to type in whatever you think might work and see if it's actually there. And chances are it will be. Okay, you can find a lot of very interesting things. Here you can find things like underwater photography and even Tinder. And in fact, here you can see if you type in toilet, this is what comes up. And if you type in bark, that's what comes up. You kind of get the point. So where does this information come from? Well, there's 3 main avenues in which Facebook gathers this data. First of all, you've actually given it to them. All right. As I said, did you add your marital status when you got married? Did you put your birth date? Have you allowed location? Did you put which school or uni you went to? Or, for example, did you put where you work? All this stuff is giving Facebook information and ammunition for us advertisers to use. Next, you've interacted with content like it on their platforms. Remember that time you liked that dog page? Or the time you clicked on that ad about wall decor and everything now has to do with wall decor? Well, they take notes on everything and store it in their database so you, the advertiser, can have the best results they can offer. Ultimately, if you do well, you'll spend more money with them. And they know that. Lastly, they bought it from a third party. Now, Facebook also buys data from thousands of other companies and websites. Now, here's some examples of how we find interests for our clients. Now, here are some questions to ask yourself in order to find good interests. And here's some examples of how we actually find interests for our clients. So in terms of good questions, first of all, scenarios where people would use the product or service. Next, ask yourself what kind of people would use the product or service. Next, ask yourself how people would use the product or service and why they're actually using it in the first place. So let's circle back to one of the examples we visited on the module, Science Behind a Creative That Sells. Here we have sun protective clothing. Now I'm actually going to run through 4 angles and we will find and think of 2 interests per angle that make sense. Now, this doesn't mean that we will only be using the angles with their corresponding interests, but keep in mind the structure of this ad set. Okay, so all the angles go together in all ad sets. This is just a good way of finding interests that can work using the ideas you already worked on when working on the ads. So the first angle is sunny weather, okay? And here we've got everything pertaining to vacationing, summer, holidays, beach, etc., etc. And those are just sort of 2 angles that you can use right there. Next, we have sun protection and skin cancer. And you can see sort of some of the interests that we're looking to target are skin cancer foundation, sunscreen, as well as sun protective clothing. Next, we've got the angle of fishing. Okay, so we've got fishing as well as fishing techniques as an interest. And then we've also got Bass Pro Shops, which is a shop that's very well known in the fishing community. Next, we have outdoor sports. And we can see right here things like surfing or beach volleyball are two great ones that you can target. Then you can find hundreds of interests that make sense, all right? And you can also spend time in Google understanding the target audience, knowing what TV shows they watch, what they read, where they live, etc., etc. We've even had before where we have certain clients and we just know very well the sort of stuff that they buy. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Someone that drives a Porsche or a Bentley is, for the most part, more likely to wear Loro Piana. Like, these things kind of go together, right? Like Loro Piana, Patek Philippe rather than whatever, a Rolex or whatever. Like, and someone who dresses like this, has this, probably drives a Porsche or a Bentley. Right, it's kind of like, I'm a bit of a grandpa, kind of an old man kind of guy. And you can kind of look at these heuristics, whereas there's some brands where, let's just be honest, someone that drives a Lamborghini is also more likely to have a little bit more flashy clothing and be probably more into some louder brands like Gucci or Balenciaga, et cetera, right? So you can kind of find these pairings and you can kind of find how, and a lot of that stuff can also pertain to the places that they travel, right? Or the places they hang out, the things that they buy, the cars they drive, where in the world they live. All of these things can kind of just blend into one. So as I said, this is why the onboarding questions are so important. And this is really why understanding your clients' customers / clients is very, very important, all right? Because when you know their customers / clients inside out, it makes targeting very, very easy because, as I said, what they do in their free time. They know, obviously their desires, their wants, which is super important for the offer and the angles. But as I said, you just know, them very well, right? You know them like the back of your hand, and you know the sort of things that they're interested in, and that makes your job a lot easier. Now, last up, let me actually show you how to run an interest-based ad. Now, after having a list of interests you want to target, now comes the real game, and that's testing them. Now, the way you go about it is you have one single interest per ad set of the ones you choose, and you let it run with the budgets already discussed, or at least enough to get more than one of the event you want, usually around $20 to $60 to $70 a day. Now, the reason why you want to run these interests independently is because that is the only way for you to isolate the variables and see what is working, okay? Let's just say you chose 6 interests and you kind of bundle them all together. Well, if things go right, then you won't actually be able to answer the question of which interest is doing the best or which one is going bad and probably should not be there. You also won't be able to answer because all the data is dirty and mixed up. And even worse, if it doesn't go your way, you still don't know why, all right? Are all the interests bad? Should I just chuck them all out and, start again? You have no idea. Or is it, it could literally be one interest that is so bad, all right? And, let's say it's getting more budget allocation for whatever reason, and you'll never know. So this is why it's so important to separate them, because you will be able to answer all these questions and you will also be able to turn off the interests that aren't working. Now, I actually show you how to make all of these decisions on the module Load Balancing Budgets. And in my years of advertising, as I said, I've still never understood some of these ad gurus who are like, and then you take you take this lookalike audience on this percentage and you bundle it up with this. And like, my favorite thing is just looking at like a marketer's like whiteboard, and it's just, everything is just so fucking complicated, and they think they look smart, but the results are terrible. All right. Advertisers, what are we doing here? We're scientists. Like that's really all it is. We're conducting a lot of micro experiments and optimizing the entire ship based on these little micro experiments. All right. If you're a scientist, you will never add more complexity than need be, because you're trying to isolate the variables and see what actually works. And obviously, the more complex you make it, the harder it is to do that job. So, good thing you've got this training. You've got the best training on earth. Literally, I can say that hands down when it comes to ad stuff, because, I've really just made my mission to break this stuff down for you as easy and simple to understand as humanly possible. So, let's move on to action step. I don't know why I'm like in this weird mode today. I don't know. Sorry. I'll stop doing that. So the next thing is I actually want you to repeat the same exercise that we just did, right? Where I, kind of picked out multiple angles, and then I actually picked interest based on that. And I want you to do that with one of your current clients, or if you don't have that, just think of some clients. And I actually want you to use the same angles we wrote on the module, Science Behind a Creative That Sells. All right, and we've already gone ahead and done that exercise. So ladies and gentlemen, that brings it to the end of today's today's module. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.